one of the solutions that we all, us lay people who are non-scientific, just kind of think all the time is, all right, just make the whole thing solar. It sounds great, you know, make everything solar and wind. So what is preventing us from once and for all, I understand we have governments that interfere, but if the government, if we got the right government in, or a country that had the right approach, do we right now know how to say, if we had complete cooperation and we're willing to fund it, do we know how to power the country by solar, or is the technology not there?
Let me address that one. So, first of all, you can't just change overnight. That's just not going to happen. We have massive investments in our current energy infrastructure, and no one's going to turn that off tomorrow. But let's just say you did. How quickly can you bring in renewable energy sources to make up the balance? So if you want to take nuclear off the table, as Helen would argue, you're going to need a lot of what's called baseload power from somewhere else. Baseload power means power that's on all the time. So solar power is not that, and neither is wind, because the sun is not shining when it's cloudy, and the wind is not blowing when it's calm. And so you have this variability in solar and wind that needs to be dealt with, because our demand is smooth, not jumpy, like whether we don't all stop using our air conditioner if a cloud blocks the sun. And so what do you do to get baseload power if you're not going to use nuclear and you don't want to use fossil fuels? Where else can you go? So you can go to hydropower, hydroelectric dams. It's a great way to get baseload power. We get a lot of electricity that way today, but there are limits to just how much power worldwide you can get from hydropower. It will be a big piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't answer the baseload need all by itself. If we're going to do it just with other variable sources like solar and wind, what we need to do is to store that energy when we have extra. So in the middle of the afternoon, when the sun's really bright and your solar panels are blasting out electricity, generally you actually can't use all that electricity. There's more than you could use, and you just throw it away in today's electric grid. What we can do, though, is we can save that energy and use it when everyone comes home from work and turns on their televisions and air conditioners and plugs in their Teslas and whatever else and starts drawing more power. That's when the peak in demand is. Unfortunately, it's not when there's the peak in the sunshine. And so if we can store that power and shift it so it's available to use later on, we can solve this problem of the variability. And there are many ways in which you can store that energy. One way would be with batteries. Tesla just came out with this product. Elon Musk's company just came out with this product that is selling like crazy. So there's clearly a public demand, hunger for this type of technology. That's one way, is electrical storage, batteries like that. Another way to store it is thermally. So the sun gives us a lot of heat, and you can store that heat actually much more easily than you can store electricity in a battery. You can think a coffee thermos, how long a good coffee thermos keeps your coffee hot, right? Hours and hours and hours. You can do the same thing with other fluids, where the sun heats them up to get super hot, hundreds of degrees Celsius, and you store them in an insulated container, and they're just sitting there waiting for you to use them, and now you can use those later to boil water, make steam, turn turbines, make electricity, just like from a coal-fired power plant or a nuclear power plant, except that energy came straight from the sun. So there are options for baseload power. Those technologies exist today, but they need to get scaled up massively, and the costs still need to come down.
Yeah, there's two other things you can do that you didn't mention, which is one is long-term transmission of electrical energy, so that you can, it's not windy in Florida, but it's windy in Georgia. You can transmit power over a distance, and you can get some smoothing of the variability in solar energy that way. I mean, the other thing that's been looked at, and I think will become more common, is demand management, where you look at devices that could be on, it doesn't matter whether they're on now or on 3 hours from now, and you can control when those are on based on the availability of power. And I think that's one thing that I know utilities are exploring, and I would expect we'll see more of.
Yeah, a good example of that's actually that Tesla car. When you come home from work at the end of the day and you plug that thing in, you just want to charge it in the morning. You're probably not taking it out again, so you don't need it to charge when you plug that thing in. It can charge from midnight to 4 a.m., and you'd be perfectly happy with that when there's very little demand on the grid. That's a good example of what Robert's referring to.
Aside from the climate disruption and resource depletion conversation, Dr. Morris, you speak about water. Are you concerned that the situation with the amount of, like I'll call it chemicals that are in our air, water, land, soil, food, clothing, furniture, is this something that could rise to the point that could have such an effect on society? One of the statistics I read when I started this, and remember, I have no scientific background at all. I'm just a random person who's reading articles. And one of the things I read is that the sperm counts have gone down by 50%, and autism rates are rising like crazy. So is the chemicals that we're spouting, and I guess you could throw into this, the radiation that's out there, and the cell phone radiation, and I mean, is any of this rise at some point to a level of concern that we could, I don't know, destroy ourselves in the next 30, 40, 50 years from that stuff? Is that?
Well, it might help reduce the 10 billion people we're worried about. But as Helen said earlier, I think we have this paradigm that's been created by default in a way where the burden is on us to prove that a chemical is hazardous or an exposure is hazardous to have anything happen to it. I mean, to me, the most striking example is the fact that glyphosate has just been declared a probable carcinogen. And I've watched as Monsanto has launched this unbelievable assault on science and on the they're trying to discredit the World Health Organization and treat it as if it's some rogue organization for declaring glyphosate a carcinogen, because it's by far the most heavily used chemical, herbicide in the world, and they've created this monster of a plant that allows them to, it can exist where you can just spread the glyphosate so heavily that nothing else no plant can grow except this miracle corn. And they present this as a wonderful solution, and everybody's going to starve if we ban glyphosate. I think we've created a society that's very dependent on these chemicals. It's scary as hell to me that it's 90% of the corn grown in the United States uses this specific plant, this genetically modified corn created by Monsanto, so that Monsanto can also create the herbicide that you need to put on that corn to make it grow. If anybody tries to challenge that, suddenly we have a plant that's too big to fail. And I think this is a major problem. I'm not sure that it's necessarily on the same scale in a way as things like global warming. It's something that's going to sort of chips away at us, and we need to change the paradigm so that we're not just putting these chemicals out there and waiting for people to die so that there's enough epidemiology that we can prove that this is a chemical that shouldn't be there, and by then it's a $20 billion chemical, so we can't really fight it. I mean, it's a system that's designed to put hazardous chemicals out there.